Here you go, as promised. This is Daily Dose of Dudley Car Edition. I'm in the parking lot of my daughter's volleyball club. So they're inside practicing, and no adults allowed in there because of pandemic, of course. So I'm in my car, warm enough in here, but we've got more Christmas Carol to read, so I didn't want to mess you guys up there. So remember when we left off last time, some people had arrived. Scrooge was watching. They had arrived in like a almost like a pawn shop, and they had all this stuff, presumably from somewhere kind of shady. So Scrooge isn't sure why he's seeing these conversations about this dead person or why he's here yet. So he's still putting it together. I'm sure you're starting to guess what's going to happen, but let's read on, okay? Top of page 64. What odds then, Miss Dilber, said the woman. Every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did. So it sounds like they've stolen from somebody who died that used to be greedy. I don't know. That's true indeed, said the laundress. No man more so. Why then don't stand staring as if you was afraid, woman? Who's the wiser? We're not going to pick holes in each other's coats, I suppose. No indeed, said Mrs. Dilber and the man together. We should hope not. Very well then, cried the woman, that's enough. Who's the worse for the loss of a few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose. No indeed, said Mrs. Dilber, laughing. If he wanted to keep him after he was dead, a wicked old screw, pursued the woman, why wasn't his natural in his lifetime? He'd had somebody to look after him when he was struck with death, instead of lying gasping out his last there, alone by himself. It's the truest words that ever were spoke, said Mrs. Dilber. It's a judgment on him. So they're like, if he wanted people to take care of him when he was dying, then maybe he would have been a little nicer before, so maybe he wouldn't have to worry about people stealing this stuff after he died and selling it off. I wish it was a little heavier judgment, replied the woman, and it should have been. You may depend upon if I could have laid my hands on anything else. Open that bundle, old Joe, and let me see the value of it. Speak out plain. I'm not afraid to be the first, nor afraid of them to see it. We know pretty well that we were helping ourselves before we met here, I believe. It's no sin. Open the bundle, Joe. But the gallantry of her friends would not allow of this, and the man in faded black, mounting the breech first, produced his plunder. It was not extensive. A seal or two, a pencil case, a pair of sleeve buttons, and a brooch of no great value were all. They were severely examined and appraised by old Joe, who chalked the sums he was disposed to give for each upon the wall and added them up to a total when he found there was nothing more to come. That's your account, said Joe, and I wouldn't give another sixpence if I was to be boiled for not doing it. Who's next? So the first person's all the stuff they took from this dead person and presented it to old Joe, and he's giving them an amount for it. Mrs. Dilber was next. Sheets and towels, a little wearing apparel, 2 old-fashioned silver teaspoons, a pair of sugar tongs, and a few boots. Her account was stated on the wall in the same manner. I always give too much to the ladies. It's a weakness of mine, and that's the way I'll ruin myself, said old Joe. That's your account. If you asked me for another penny and made it an open question, I'd repent of being so liberal and knock off half a crown. And now undo my bundle, Joe, said the first woman. Joe went down on his knees with the greater convenience of opening it, and having unfastened a great many knots, dragged out a large and heavy roll of some dark stuff. What do you call this? Said Joe. Bed curtains. Ah, returned the woman, laughing and leaning forward on her crossed arms. Bed curtains. You don't mean to say you took him down, rings and all, with him lying there? Said Joe. Yes, I do, replied the woman. Why not? You were born to make your fortune, said Joe, and you'll certainly do it. I certainly shan't hold my head when I can't get anything in it by reaching it out, for the sake of such a man. He was, I promise you, Joe, returned the woman coolly. Don't drop that oil upon the blankets now. His blankets? Asked Joe. Who else's do you think? Replied the woman. He isn't likely to take cold without 'em, I dare say. I hope he didn't die of anything catching, eh? Said old Joe, stopping with his work and looking up. Don't you be afraid of that, returned the woman. I ain't so fond of his company that I'd loiter about him for such things, if he did. You may look through the shirt till your eyes ache, but you won't find a hole in it, not a threadbare place. It's the best he had, and a fine one, too. They'd have wasted it if it hadn't been for me. So she's got all this stuff from someone who's died, someone greedy. When she brought clothes and pieces from the bed, the guy was like, I hope he didn't have anything contagious. And she's like, oh, if he had something contagious, I would not have bothered myself with him. He's not worth it. So, what do you call wasting of it? Asked old Joe. Putting it on him to be buried in it, to be sure. So she's saying, like, I took the nicest shirt because they would have wasted it by putting him on him to be buried. Somebody was fool enough to do it, but I took it off again. If calico ain't good enough for such a purpose, it isn't good enough for anything. It's quiet us becoming to the body. He can't look uglier than he did in that one. Scrooge listened to this dialogue in horror, as they sat grouped about their spoil in the scant light afforded by the old man's lamp. He viewed them with a detestation and disgust which could hardly have been greater, though they had been obscene demons marking the corpse itself. "Ha ha!" laughed the same woman when old Joe produced a flannel bag with money in it, told out their several gains upon them. "This is the end of it, you see. He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive, to profit us when he was dead. Ha ha ha!" "Spirits," said Scrooge, shuddering from head to foot. I see. The case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way. Now, merciful heaven, what is this?" He recoiled in terror, for the scene had changed, and now he almost touched a bed, a bare, uncurtained bed, on which beneath a ragged sheet there lay something covered up, which, though it was dumb, announced itself in awful language. Dumb meaning it can't speak. So he's seeing something laying under the sheets on a bed. The bed doesn't have a curtain. It's... okay. The room was very dark. Too dark to be observed with any accuracy, though Scrooge glanced around it in obedience to a secret impulse, anxious to know what kind of room it was. A pale light, rising in the outer air, fell straight upon the bed, and on it, plundered and bereft, unwatched, unwept, uncared for, was the body of this man. Scrooge glanced towards the phantom. Its steady hand was pointed to the head. The cover was so carelessly adjusted that the slightest raising of it, the motion of a finger upon Scrooge's part, would have disclosed the face. He thought of it, felt how easy it would be to do, and longed to do it, but had no power to withdraw the veil than to dismiss the spectre at his side. So he wants to move the sheet and see who this dead man is, but he can't. Like, physically, he can't. He doesn't have the power. "Oh, cold, cold, rigid, dreadful death, set up thine altar here, and dress it with such terrors as thou cast at the command, for this is thy dominion. But of the loved, revered, and honored head thou canst not turn one hair to thy dread purpose, or make one feature odious. It is not that the hand is heavy and will fall down when released. It is not that the heart and pulse are still, but that the hand was open, generous, and true, the heart brave, warm, and tender, and the pulse a man's. Strike, shadows, strike, and see his good deeds springing from the wound, to saw the world with life immortal." No voice pronounced these words in Scrooge's ear, and yet he heard them when he looked upon the bed. He thought, if this man could be raised up now, what would be his foremost thoughts? Avarice, hard-dealing, gripping cares? They have brought him to a rich end, truly. He lay in the dark, empty house with not a man, a woman, or a child, to say that he was kind to me, or in this or that, and for the memory of one kind word I will be kind to him. A cat was tearing at the door, and there was the sound of gnawing rats beneath the hearthstone. What they wanted in the room of death, and why they were so restless and disturbed, Scrooge did not dare to think. So it's really bothering Scrooge that there's nobody here for this person who's died. Nobody mourning him, nobody giving good memories, none of that. And it's upsetting him. "Spirit," he said, "this is a fearful place. In leaving it, I shall not leave its lesson. Trust me, let's go." Still the ghost pointed with an unmoved finger to the head. "I understand you," Scrooge returned, "and I would do it if I could, but I have not the power, Spirit, I have not the power." Again it seemed to look upon him. "If there is any person in the town who feels emotion caused by this man's death," said Scrooge, quite astonished, "show that person to me, Spirit, I beseech you. So if there's anyone who has any emotion over this guy's death, show me." The phantom spread its dark robe before him for a moment like a wing, and withdrawing it, revealed a room by daylight, where a mother and her children were. She was expecting someone, and with anxious eagerness, for she walked up and down the room, started at every sound, looked out the window, glanced at the clock, tried, but in vain, to work with her needle, and could hardly bear the voices of the children in their play. At length the long-expected knock was heard. She hurried to the door and met her husband, a man whose face was careworn and depressed, though he was young. There was a remarkable expression in it now, a kind of serious delight of which he felt ashamed, and which he struggled to repress. He sat down to the dinner that had been hoarding for him by the fire, and when she asked him faintly what news, which was not until after a long silence. He appeared embarrassed how to answer. Is it good, she said, or bad, to help him? Bad, he answered. We're quite ruined? No, there is yet hope, Caroline. If he relents, she said, amazed, nothing is past hope. If such a miracle has happened, he is past relenting, said her husband. He's dead. She was a mild and patient creature if her face spoke truth, but she was thankful in her soul to hear it, and she said so with clasped hands. She prayed forgiveness the next moment and was so sorry, but the first was the emotion of her heart. So she's like happy at this, whoever it is has died. She's happy and then kind of says, oh, forgive me for thinking that, but she is happy. What the half-drunken woman who I told you of last night said to me when I tried to see him and obtain a week's delay, and what I thought was a mere excuse to avoid me, turns out to have been quite true. He was not only very ill, but dying then. To whom will our debt be transferred? I don't know, but before the time we shall be ready with the money. And even though we were not, it would be a bad fortune indeed to find so merciless a creditor in his successor. We may sleep tonight with light hearts, Caroline. So our debt's going to be moved to someone else, but there's no way they're going to be as cruel as this guy was. Yes, soften it as they would, their hearts were lighter. The children's faces hushed and clustered round to hear what wise so little understood were brighter, and it was happier house for the man's death. The only emotion that the ghost could show him caused by the event was one of pleasure. So Scrooge said, show me someone who cares that this guy died. Phantom shows him people who are happy this guy died. Let me see some tenderness connected with a death, said Scrooge, or that dark chamber, spirit, which we just left now will be forever present to me. So he says, show me someone who cares about a death. And we'll leave it there for now. That's the end of page 68. Perfect point before the next video. This one's going to take forever to load because I'm doing it over my data plan. So anyway, probably be on the road for part 3, but we're almost there. Make sure you got your homework handy. Make sure you're paying attention to the places they've visited. Got to check it off there, right? Okay. So I will see you later. Thanks for watching your Daily Dose of Dudley. Bye.